Hi, my name is Phil. I like talking about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss the calls from a senior Labour MP for the party, and specifically for the party leadership candidates, to get fully behind proportional representation for the future. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, that the UK desperately needs to drag itself from the 19th century and adopt proportional representation. The only system that actually represents the democratic will of the people when you have more than two parties is fairly obvious. The problem is that neither of the two biggest parties in the UK ever really get behind it in any serious way. For the Conservatives, first past the post is the obvious electoral system to back. It allows them to enter majority governments, as they have again recently, with a minority of the electorate voting for them, even a small minority. The votes are not split in the same way as more left-leaning parties, so of course they would want first past the post. With proportional representation, the Conservatives would pretty much never be able to form a government again, even in coalition in all likelihood. But what about Labour? I mean, they spend so much time in opposition. They do have their votes split amongst other parties. Surely they should back it. Well, as a former Labour Party candidate, Clive Lewis was pointing out in a speech, the problem is that the party keeps moving from one position to the other. As he puts it, when Labour are in opposition, like deep opposition as I would put it, then of course they back proportional representation. It's a system that would mean Labour form a coalition government almost all of the time, and would likely be the senior partner in such a coalition most of the time as well. It's win-win. Except the problem comes when Labour actually get themselves together and manage to win even under the archaic Tory benefiting first past the post system. Then support for electoral reform drains away. I mean, there's a couple of aspects to this. The first one, it's as simple as this. No government really wants to change the system that put it into power. But the other thing is this. Labour probably at those points thinks to themselves, well, although we will get into power more often with first past the post, we won't ever form a majority government. In fact, they'll almost never form a majority government again. And it's a bit like, would we rather form a majority government some of the time, or a coalition government all of the time? And the thinking always is, oh no, we'll let the Tories in every now and then if we can have a majority government now and then, which is absolute madness, but that seems to be the thinking. And I would say, and this is again my take on things, I think politics has changed now with Brexit and Boris Johnson. There was a time when Labour might have thought that they could bide their time, get into power, reverse the Tory damage and get the country back on the right track. Although surely for those who've been in politics for a long time in the UK, much older than I am, and have seen, Labour wax and wane, it must be very dispiriting when Labour end up losing power and then you just watch all the benefits draining away again. But the problem now is that obviously it takes a lot longer to build than to destroy, and we have a new dynamic. Brexit is damage that cannot be fixed in an entire generation of Labour government, let alone a single parliament. It's too late. And the damage that Boris Johnson is intending to further inflict over this coming parliament, and he's very likely to get away with most of it, that also can't realistically be rectified even if Labour win in 2024. He is intended to put an awful lot of changes, constitutional changes into the country that are not easy to unpick. As such, there are no increased calls for Labour to really get behind proportional representation. But there needs to be. There absolutely needs to be. We need, I think, I'm a member of the Labour Party and I will be pushing this quite strongly. Clive Lewis has now called for the Labour candidates to get fully behind electoral reform. Now, to a certain extent, most of them have done. All of the three realistic candidates have done, but to varying degrees of backing proportional representation. But you have to, because we can't just have a party that goes, yeah, proportional representation, then look like they might actually be in a position to win a general election and then go, yeah, let's not. We don't need it after all, it seems. So Clive Lewis, and there's a really good quote here. I'm going to quote this exactly because it's brilliant. He says it's almost laughable to think climate change, our ageing society, the rise of robots, obviously leading to unemployment, and epidemic of loneliness, and so much more can be outsourced to a government that wins power on the basis of 25% of eligible voters. Because that's what's happened. He says that's not a mandate, that's a shackle. And it is completely correct. Now, Keir Starmer, who is most people's preferred candidate to be leader, but remains to be seen whether he's Labour's preferred candidate to be leader, has certainly talked about reform and identified that we cannot have voters feeling like their vote doesn't count, as it all too often does in first past the post. You know, you might be forgiven for thinking, when you think about the huge swing to the Conservatives in the last general election, oh, people's voting behaviour changed massively. It didn't. It was minor changes. That's all it ever is. When you get a massive swing from one party to another, which is not what we got in the last general election. It was from a more neutral position to the Tories. But you have had it in before when it's gone from Tories to Labour or Labour to Tories with a huge swing. It's still only a small number of constituencies, a small minority of constituencies that determine it. It is every time. And within those constituencies, it's very often just a small number of people. In the vast majority of constituencies, people will feel, and a lot of the time they'll be right. They're not always right, but but a lot of the time they're right. Their vote actually doesn't count. It doesn't count at all, and it should. Now, if everyone, went out and voted, then it would, because there isn't even the safest seat in the country doesn't have a majority big enough to withstand everyone who doesn't vote in that constituency going out and voting for the other guy or woman. But the perception is there, and so then it becomes reality. And that is another aspect of proportional representation. Your vote will count. It will almost always count for something, even if you're not voting for one of the main parties. So another stat that Lewis noted here is that the last general election, the Conservatives needed 38,000 votes for each of the seats they won. So on average, it took 38,000 votes to get them an MP. The Liberal Democrats did nothing with 38,000 votes. Each of their MPs was bought with 336,000 votes. The Greens needed 865,000 votes for each seat, for their one seat. I mean, that's not democracy. That's not even remotely democratic. And if we're going to get anything out of the terrible change to the country that have now befallen us, all of these people that really wanted Brexit, Jeremy Corbyn, lots of Conservative ministers as well, saying, right, we need to move forward, forget it, Brexit's done now, we need to move forward. Well, we're not going to forget it as such, but yes, we do need to move forward. We need to move forward. We can't reverse what has been done really quickly. We would like to reverse as much as we can quickly, but we can't reverse it all. Permanent damage has been done. When we say permanent, we at least mean for several generations. But in terms of moving forward, we need to at least get something out of it. Because even if, let's say, in 5 or 10 years' time, we manage to rejoin the EU, and that seems optimistic, but let's say, even that is not going to make things worth it, because we will have still lost so much in the country. We'll have just gotten back some of what we lost, but we will have still lost. We need to actually make a tangible gain, and this could be it, that at least we pick ourselves up and get the country onto a more modern path of proportional representation, and actually have elections where, whether it's right or wrong, MPs are voted for, or at least parties get a share of the vote according to their share of the vote, which doesn't happen now. So anyway, I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.